Good evening, everybody. We're glad you're here. We will now introduce our speaker for the evening, John Kidelan.
Yep.
Wonderful painter, and he paints with coffee. We're looking forward to hearing you speak.
Well, everybody, thank you for having me here tonight. I will say I'm very nervous, even though at my day job of being a manager at Ingram Micro, I have to speak in front of my team constantly and in front of huge crowds, but not about my art. And as all of you know, probably as artists, it's the one thing you're probably the most self-conscious about is showing off your art. So it doesn't matter how good we get, we're always thinking we could do better. So thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here with this group. I was recruited over a little over a year ago to ask to join, and I was very excited to do so. I've joined a couple of the Zoom meetings when I can get out of work early enough to get on, and to be able to speak to all of you today is really a pleasure and an honor. Thank you all. I'm gonna try and go slow, and I've practiced this too, so we'll see how well I do. Yes, I paint with coffee, and it's kind of interesting because in my art career, I used to even say, I hate painting. I don't like painting. It's not the control of a pencil. I was an illustrator. I liked drawing. I worked a lot with Copic markers, colored pencils, a lot of stuff like that. My grandfather taught me to draw on my mother's side. His name was Louis Rosillo. He was an iron worker, but at the end of the day, he would come home and he could draw beautiful animals and colored pencils and introduce me to drawing. He actually taught me a lot to draw using TV guides. So remember the old TV guides where they had the grayscale? That's how I learned shading, right? So right from the very beginning, I was poisoned with pop culture to draw Magnum PI and Michael Knight of the 80s. And that's what started my journey into artwork. I was introduced to comic books. The first book that I would get was a book called The Savage Sword of Conan. Beautiful, amazing art. It was this larger type of comic book magazine, and Joe Jusko was the artist. I got to meet him at one of our at a Comic-Con and sit at a table next to him, which was amazing. Growing up to be able to meet the guy that got you into comic books. From there, I got into like the normal comic books of any kid growing up in the 80s. Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends were like, my favorite thing to watch. So getting hooked on comics and getting involved with all that, really, to me, the artwork was just amazing to watch come to life. And in the 90s, comics really had a huge boom with artists like Jim Lee, Wells Portacio, Carlos Pacheco, who we just lost yesterday to ALS. One of an artist that I actually draw a lot of inspiration from. His style is being so a mix of realism and anime in such a clean style. I got to meet him in Toronto. He just passed away yesterday at 6 years old. That's where my roots were comic books, right? So I did a lot of, long ago, the Queen City Bookstore in Buffalo was the store that was like, hey, we do Comic Cons, you should come and get a table. And I was like, I don't know if I'm that good, but I tried and I sat there and I started small with my drawings. And if you look at my early stuff, I don't know how I ever sold anything, but I did. I've been doing Buffalo Comic Con. I think I'm the longest person running going there. The Nemo who owns Queen City just keeps having me back. It's gotta be almost 15 years now. It's a long time of every year doing it. Since then it grew and it got bigger. Nickel City Con, which is a much bigger show that expanded. And then the first art show I did was Glen Park. And I did Glen Park Art Festival, and I was terrified. I looked around and I saw all of you guys with your trailers and all of your elaborate setups and everything. And I'm like, we have to go. We should leave now. We should leave now. Let's just pack up. My wife's like, no, you got this. And I'm like, I'm just a guy who paints comic book type stuff. This show, I don't belong here. And she convinced me to stay. I'm not good at these types of things when it comes to my art. I get very nervous and very panicked. I'm very lucky to have a beautiful woman as my wife who puts up with my nervousness and my anxiety when it gets. I stayed, and here was the cool thing. Like when we go to shows like this, there's a lot of, especially Glen Park was a lot of oil painting and jewelry and stuff like that. And now you had a guy who painted Batman. and Captain America, and all the husbands who got dragged to the shows with their wives were like, oh, hey, right? And then people would walk in my booth and they'd be like, why does it smell like coffee in here? And I'd say, I paint with coffee. And I don't know why I just thought I was painted brown. Brown is not, it's not like I use a cheap paint. It's coffee. So you had to explain it was coffee, and we did slowly, the booth became, we treated it like a coffee house, like we put coffee beans on the table. So when you walk in, you smell everything. And everybody always thinks like, oh, it's the coffee beans and I smell. And I go, no, it's the paintings, smell the painting. We always encourage people, go right up to it, smell it. And it still smells like coffee. The way that I make the stuff that I paint with, the aroma lasts a very long time. We have one of the first buffaloes I painted hanging in our kitchen, and that's got to be 5-6 years now, and you can still walk up to it and you can still smell the coffee, and it's really nice to have like the Keurig, because then when the steam comes out the Keurig, it just kind of brings the flavor out. However, when I started, things have changed a whole lot from what you see up here. Is I went on my Facebook and my Instagram to find the oldest coffee painting I could find that I didn't burn and throw away. It was this one here, is the Batman. And originally I thought when I was doing coffee paintings, I watched other people do it, and some people did it with spoons. They would dribble the coffee on a canvas with a spoon and do like a silhouette and use negative space to get detail. So that's how I started. And then so that was like my original stuff that I would do. And these were two of the very first ones. These, where were we? Planet, it's a Daily Planet on Hurdle, it's a coffee shop. And they had me come in and do like a gallery with them. And this was like the first kind of like showing of my work. Then I realized I could draw on the canvas with pencils and go over the pencil lines coffee. And I got a little bit better and I started doing experiments. I did some Doctor Who commissions for some friends. Then I started branching into other television shows and pop culture, like Game of Thrones. And this one was one of my favorites. It actually won at the Lancaster art show that we had at the village. And as did this one, Jon Snow and Daenerys from Game of Thrones. So learning how to control the coffee and get it to blend, it's very much like watercolor. Before I get into more art, I should probably explain the ooze, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ooze I keep in this jar. So the way you make it, I'm going to give away the secret. My wife always says, don't tell everybody how you make it. Don't tell the secret recipe. It's instant coffee. It's not regular drinking coffee. Regular drinking coffee is nothing but water that is run through coffee grounds. Instant coffee is freeze-dried coffee beans that have been freeze-dried so that when you drink instant coffee, it is the strongest, purest coffee you can get because you are literally drinking coffee beans. You're not drinking water run through it. You are the strongest coffee you can get. But when I make it, I have to use more grounds than water, so it comes out thicker. And then I'll achieve some color sometime with watercolor paint. So I'll use a little watercolor paint, but I'll blend it with coffee. I won't blend it with water. So I'll set up a tray and I'll do like a couple puddles of the coffee and dilute with the water to get different gradient levels of dark to light. Over the years of learning how to brew it differently, chill it, keeping it in a refrigerator keeps it all longer and fresher. It thickens it. I met a gentleman online from Spain who he just achieved such rich dark colors when he painted with coffee. I messaged him, he didn't speak English, so it was a little difficult to get some secrets out of him, and I don't think he wanted to share. But I figured out by watching his videos, he would sometimes do a little drip of black ink into the coffee when he was brewing it too, to get a darker color. And then I also watched him do one time, you can buy an Italian press, little old school Italian presses that you make coffee on the stove. If you put it in that and burn it, it gets a darker, richer color too. It also, however, makes your house smell like burnt coffee for several days, which does not go over too well. Also, you can never use the Italian press again, other than for burning coffee, because it's just shut. It's not. Luckily, they're only like $7 a pound. So, as I progressed, I've also been told. I've had people walk into my booth and tell me your art is very sloppy. You're very messy.
Oh.
And I'm like, yes, that's intentional. I like art, even when I'm drawing, I will leave my sketch lines in. I like the sense of movement. I like it not looking so refined. I actually worked with somebody, we used to do Comic Cons together. His work was super hyper polished, very Disney-like, very clean. I'm the opposite, and I don't mind being messy, and I intentionally will sometimes have the splatters on the canvas look a certain way based upon what the subject matter is. I've learned how to control the drips. It's also extremely relaxing to just watch a coffee line drip and think you know where it's gonna go, and then it does sometimes. It's crazy, like it's, oh, it went around her eye and didn't go through the eye, and that worked perfectly. Right. I've also been known to puddle it on the canvas, walk outside, and then flick the canvas very hard so I get more of a motion sense to the canvas. So if you've ever seen me at any of our shows, I will paint at the show sometimes and be behind my tent flicking a canvas. I'm not angry, I'm moving. Sometimes the negative space helps the piece. The drips have to be in just the right spot. I started doing animals, and it's kind of like an homage to my grandfather. Owl piece, the bull, and the lion were original pieces that we took when I did my first show at Elmwood Avenue, but I'm not on Elmwood, I'm the offshoot one, you know, like where the weird people go. That's really so. I don't get to be on the fancy part with all the cool people. That's the dream, but they tell me no every year. So I go to Allen West. I'm on the Allen West strip. I love it there. I love the crowd. The guy who came in and told me that I was sloppy and messy, the other people buying art in my booth and it was full, all yelled at him and kicked him out of my booth for me. So we did music is art. So I thought I would try doing rock stars. So I did Hendrix, Jerry Garcia. And while we were there, music is art, I will say it's not a good show for me. I don't know why. I just don't. Not a lot of people buying paintings at music is art. They're just enjoying the music, I think, there. So but I was sitting there and I drew a buffalo. And I did it on the canvas. And I'm like, everybody's buying buffalo stuff. I bet I could draw a buffalo. I put a picture of a buffalo on my phone, started drawing a buffalo. And as I was painting it on the easel, a person came up behind me and said, "Is that for sale?" I'm like, "Sure. How much?" $20. Yeah, okay, great, I'll buy that. Sold that. Let's do another one. Did another one. Sold that one. Sold that one. I became known as the coffee buffalo guy for a very long time. We did some charity events with the chapel where we went and raised money with them to we taught a class on how to paint buffaloes. We did 3 different classes to raise charity at Daily Planet for different groups. So anytime I'm asked to come and do something like that and give my time for charity to do it, I always say yes, because I feel like it's karma that I've been blessed to be able to do well with my art and do well at shows. So if someone asks me to donate my time, I always say yes. So if you ever need me to help out in any way, now you know it's the secret you probably didn't. I learned adding ink lines with the buffalo, brought it out a little bit more. People seem to like that. I always get accused too that my buffaloes look very angry. We're like, why do your buffaloes always look so angry? And I said, are you from Buffalo? We're very strong people. We're very tough. We weathered a lot. So literally. So my buffaloes always look strong because if you look at an actual photo of buffalo, they sometimes do just look like sad cows. And nobody, you know, they don't like us. So this is a funny story. Again, we're on Hurdle. I don't know why all my stories take place on Hurdle Avenue. There's a gallery there, and I were at the gallery, and they sold very macabre style art, very, you know, like a baby doll head on a monkey body with the symbols type thing. It was cool, right? It's nice. And we were looking around, and the woman running the gallery said, "Oh yeah, we do all local artists." And I said, "Oh," and I said, "My husband's a local artist." And they're like, "Oh, do you have any pictures of your work?" Pulled up my Instagram, started scrolling through, and they saw a lot of the comic book stuff. And they're like, "Oh, you're that kind of artist." I didn't like that. I'm like, what was that supposed to mean? You know, like you draw stuff like this. I could do that if I wanted to. And that's the kind of like I'm the Marty McFly. Like if somebody challenges me or calls me chicken when it comes to art, I have to learn how to do it and figure it out. So I went home and I'm like, all right, let's see, macabre, and they had album covers, so I'm like, Froggy Mercury, we'll do some Froggy Mercury, and we did a John Kidelan and a Bruce Springsteen line, and then I posted those up on my Instagram, and I tagged their gallery in it. And they reached out and they're like, these are really cool. I'm like, yeah, you'll never get them though, because I wasn't good enough for you. So no, I don't care if you would sell them. It's yours now. 2020 hit us all, 2019. I have a granddaughter, she's 2 years old, her name's Leah, and she had a book of animals. And I'm like, I've not done a whole lot of animal art in a very long time. So I'm just gonna take her book and I'm gonna put a check mark next to every animal I could draw. And like, we're all locked in, right? So like, I started learning how to paint animals. This was like the first course I ever did. I was so proud of it. I was like, honey, look at this foresight. And, I just loved it so much. So it became a year of learning to do new animals, trying new techniques. The coffee changed and grew. You can notice the different tones and textures, more action, less just standard posing. I wanted to, when you saw it, for you to feel something of the animal, like if it was either regal or scary or something along those. This one we just, for the first time ever, because I always thought it would be cool to do it. I never did it. I submitted art to the Erie County Fair. We go to the Erie County Fair and they get the ribbons up there, and I'm like, what do you have to do that? They didn't even know. Did anybody here ever do it? No. Yeah. So it's like $25, but if you pay $25, you get to submit 2 pieces, but you also get 4 tickets to the fair. And I'm like, oh, well, I just want the 4 tickets to the fair. Take my granddaughter to the fair. I'm gonna get us free tickets to the fair, like just pay the $25. So I did, and then we won this one, and then another piece I'll show you later. So because it was the roar of the fair was the theme, so I submitted this. Although they meant the Roaring 20s, I don't know how I won them, but I still won. So we got arrested. We got first place. I tried. I learned. I was looking at a book of Japanese art. I saw a piece of it very similar to this. I'm like, oh, I could do a koi fish, and we'll try and do that. So this is all like stuff I've kind of done for the first time ever. I've skipped a whole massive amount of comic book numbering to you today. There's some books up here, and then I touch a little bit on it here. This piece here is at Iron Buffalo. You're familiar with Iron Buffalo, it's a coffee shop. The owner, Will, loves Godzilla. And he saw my art and he commissioned me. And he's like, I want you painting Godzilla. I want it to be the biggest thing you've ever done. And I'm like, that's all. So this is a 2 foot by 4 foot painting of Godzilla. It is huge. So just penciling that alone took forever to get on the canvas, and all the details and scales. We painted live from the coffee shop. I used his coffee, so it was painted with coffee from Iron Buffalo, right? So it was a very personal piece to him. And if you ever go to Iron Buffalo, it's weird. It's kind of like a little shrine to me where this is there. Looks like I died. Somebody asked me if I've ever done a self-portrait. I'm not big on self-portraits, but I made an attempt, and this was my attempt at self-portrait. Star Wars I got asked to do, so we dove into Star Wars and brought more colors with the watercolor. Again, trying to capture more of a feel of the characters rather than just stagnant poses. Big X-Men fan, if you're a fan of the X-Men from the 90s, this was also a request. I brought these 2 pieces here to show you, just because if you look, I just love how the coffee blended with the watercolors on this piece. And this next one here, it just works so well. And I remember finishing that night and thinking the colors just popped perfectly, and the purple and the coffee really just blended really nicely. I'm a wrestling fan. I like a group of ladies. If you're in the 80s and you didn't watch wrestling, yeah. So like then somebody I get crazy. Let's just call it manic. So I'll be like, this month it's going to be wrestling, and I'll do 1 piece for every single day of the month. And so that means creating 31 different drawings and paintings. And like, I sometimes have to start the month before, and like, it's like drives me nuts if I'm late in posting, and I'm bad at it. So we went through and we did all the different generations of wrestling. We got to meet Mick Foley at an event, and I gave him a copy of this, and he signed a copy of another one for me that I have at home. So that's good. Giant Hogan. I love drawing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I always have. The texture that you can do with them, the way that you don't always have to make them look the same way. This was another one of my favorite pieces, but just the color and pop. I remember when they sold the original of this, I was very sad. I was like, oh, I guess it's good somebody bought it, but it was very sad to see. I've done, my son collects Funkos, I collect Funkos, but we would go to these Funko swaps. And like he would sell Funkos and he's like, come with me, we're gonna do a Funko swap. Okay. And he's like, do some artwork. And people were like, oh yeah, can you do this? Can you do this? So this is the first time I incorporated acrylic paint into with the coffee because I wanted the Funkos to look plastic, right? So the difference of the watercolor of it being the softer and a little bit more muted. I approached the Funko and like, well, they're plastic toys, so I brought in the acrylic to have the colors pop more, and we would use the coffee as more of a background than the actual pieces themselves. And I thought it gave it a much more plastic feel. Everybody loved them. I did this series I love. It was called the MCU Drinking Coffee Painted with Coffee. So I took a lot of the characters from Marvel's cinematic universe, and I wanted to do what type of coffee would Tony start drinking. Well, he would have a tiny little espresso, right? He probably has it built in the suit somehow. So Tony had espresso, Black Widow had the Black Russian coffee, Thor, hipster Thanos was a fun idea that my wife, she's like, make him a hipster. We put the stones on this messenger bag. So that was fun. And then of course, if we did Marvel, we had to jump into DC next. So we did DC and we did Wonder Woman. The speed of the flash, again, the flipping of the paint, the movement. These are two of my favorites, and I always wonder if people get the continuity. Because if you look at the titles of the newspaper, it's supposed to be the same paper, but he's free and enjoying himself while she's still in prison. But they are still both drinking the same. I did some holiday stuff, and we got the holiday show coming up in December, so I did some fun Santa Clauses and Grinches. Like the buffaloes, and you can see how the buffaloes have changed over the years too, incorporating a little bit more color, giving the coffee different riches. I wanted to do like a timeline where you can see like that buffalo looks completely different than the other buffalo. Got better. I learned how to do more. Practicing it, just learning new techniques. I'm really never satisfied with doing it just the one way. I'm always trying to figure out how to make it a little bit different. Somebody asked me if I paint skull artwork. I said no, but let's give it a shot. So we're going to do skull artwork. This was a design I think I saw at Five Below on a t-shirt. And I took a picture of it. I'm like, I think I could do that. So I tried to do a little bit more artsy with the skulls and provide a little bit of a digital look with the painting. This one's right. I did a Harry Potter series. So Harry, Snape, Dumbledore, Hermione, and several others. The fun story with this one. Posted on Instagram, tagged Warner Brothers, tagged Harry Potter, right? Selling the prints, having a good time. Get an email, a message on Instagram from someone who tells me that they are from Warner Brothers. And I get messages a lot from people telling me like, hey, we're a marketing company, you should come do this. And it's rarely true. This one though seemed very realistic. And I was like, okay. And then they sent me, and I'm like, well, here's my email if you need to contact me. Sure enough, I got an email the next day from Warner Brothers. And I thought I was going to get a cease and desist. Hey, stop selling Harry Potter artwork. You don't have the rights to do that. Instead, they offered me a contract and said, you can keep selling your stuff. However, we would like to use this art piece in particular on our social media. So the deal is we're not going to pay you for putting it on social media, but you get to keep selling it, and you are technically under contract by Warner Brothers, which was huge, right? Like it was crazy to think. So I signed the contract, and then like everybody's like, "You get paid." I'm like, "Nothing, but I don't care." Swear to life, but hey, it's still just like the recognition, right? To be able to like Warner. And like I even tried, I played it smooth. We were going to Disney in like a week, and I'm like, hey, we're coming to Universal. Can you slide us some merch, maybe a free wand. No, like you keep selling. The Buffalo Bills, because I got asked to do some Bill stuff. I'm not, I am a sports guy, but not a huge sports guy. I have season tickets to the Bandits. But I'm a Bills fan, but not as Bills like Mafia type guy. I'm not that guy. That's everybody else in my family too. I was too busy reading comics. Somebody asked me to do Bills, and I like, doing Josh and like capturing some of the scenes. There's another piece I didn't include, the hurdling over the Minnesota Viking guy. Any of those types of pieces, I've done those. And again, those are, if I put them up on the easel, literally to come to the Easter Road show, the last show, I was painting them at a Rochester Comic Con that I was at. I had them like, work on these while I'm here, and bring to Easter Road when I go there. They didn't make it here because they all sold in Rochester. So Prince sold here, but all the originals sold in right off the easel. So I was like, yeah, sure. Then I did a month of horror. So I like movies. We did Freddy, we did Hulu, and then this was a hard series. I did Disney, and I like again, I make lists. I literally make lists on a spreadsheet of art to create. And I figured out every movie from 1999 to 2002, what they call the second golden age of Disney. And I did the movie of, so I did it 31 days again of Disney. That was top. And these are some of my favorites. We did Wall-E, Beauty and the Beast was the one that picked it off. And then Edmund Mode, of course, was for the and then to wrap it up, some of the pieces I did, I started getting into doing horoscopes. So this was someone asked me to do the Sagittarius and Leo, which I got the purples and blues to make it more celestial looking. And then the series I did was the Norse gods. But the way I did this was kind of unique. I challenged my family to all pose for me, for us to be the Norse gods. So that actually someone may sell a portrait. I just had a bigger beard at one point, and not that big, but that's me. I took a photograph of me, and I became Odin, and I went more of a traditional than the comic book version. My wife sitting in the back between Frigg, who Norse gods and mother, and my son Dylan, who came from the Norse god. And that is, I'm working on a current series right now, challenging myself to something weird again. The 7 Deadly Sins. They're coming. I worked on it in October. I thought I would have them in October to go with the spooky season, but too much going on and just really going crazy within my own head of getting them just to be the right way. So I finally have like 6 of them all sketched out. I have to buy them coffee, and they shall be on my Instagram link. So that's my presentation. If anybody has any questions about process or anything, let me know.
Watercolor paper?
Yeah, mixed media paper or canvas, and we'll use have a pad actually. It's not fancy, just a standard drum bar. It floats the cotton really well. If you use any other type of paper, it's really because it just absorbs super quick. And then it works. That was a canvas. So I had a canvas made. A friend of mine had the ability to create a canvas for me, so she gave me 2x4.
And John, if you could repeat questions so people can hear the.
Sure. She wanted to know the 2x4 Godzilla canvas. Was that paper or a canvas? That was a canvas. I used a standard watercolor pad, and so it doesn't work. If you use any other type of paper, the coffee just absorbs way too quickly into it. It's worse than watercolor paint. I find watercolor paint, you could blend even a little bit more. The coffee, I don't know why, it just, it's so dark that it just stains it like that. So you gotta, there's plenty of times that it's ripped up and then it's no good anymore because it you go. Yes, in the back. Yes. I started using watercolor pencils. Like I would use watercolor pencils on the canvas to shade it and then put the coffee on top of that. And I moved away from that and started using the liquid paint instead and just dripping small into the tray and then adding the coffee in.
The watercolor paint, it almost looks clear that you get in the bottles, is that what you mean?
It's like, it almost looks like a little tube of acrylic, like you could buy at Hobby Lobby, so you can get like a set of them. I'm a cheap artist. I always feel like Crayola paint works just as good as the most expensive paint I've seen. I watched videos where he's like, can you tell which drawing was done with the most expensive pencils versus a number two? You can't tell the difference. It's
Do you ever
the,
use the watercolor that's liquid in the jars?
yes, I have. But just for ease of use of traveling to the different shows, I have like a little small set that I got at Hobby Lobby that has like 5 basic colors in it, and I just carry that around. Yeah. Yeah, it's changed, but it's changed. So a lot of the animal pieces that you saw were 11 by 14s. They were heavy and cumbersome to carry around, and then 16 by 20s I do as well for canvases. Those are nice because I could do a lot on it, and if I'm getting into like bigger characters. The Norse God ones are all on 16 by 20 paper, I think, yeah. But I tend to stick with 8 by 10s, 11 by 14s, just for ease of traveling to the shows and carrying them. And we've tried to move all of our prints to be 8 by 10s rather than the 11 by 14s, because they're heavy. All of that paper is heavy to carry all those prints. And as you see, like, because I'm making like, let's do 30 WWE things. You're carrying a lot, and I probably print more than I ever should, and will die with a whole lot of prints in my garage, and my children will donate to somebody some. Yeah. Yeah, we use, so there was a Nickel City Press was on transit. We used them for a long time. Then their management changed, and they got a little iffy. It's weird. Office Max does a really good job for me, and they like my stuff and find it cool. So they'll be like, I'll put an order in and they'll be like, hey, John, we'll have it ready in like an hour. Like, I usually don't have to wait. They're like, when you see your name come in, they print it right away. I've told them, hey, if you want to, like, if I order 10 and you print 12 and you take 2 home, I'm okay. They're like, oh, no, we would never do that. And I'm like, but if it's gonna get me better quality, yeah, absolutely. So I get good quality, the paper is quality, and it's not expensive, and you can get really good coupons and stuff like that on Office Max and stuff like that too. Yeah, I use a cardstock, glossy, 80 pound.
So you're making more original.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also sell a lot of original canvases as well. So I usually show up at a show with a couple of bins of prints. And then I have like wood crates holding the 8 by 10s or the 11 by 14s, and we'll usually set up a small little like display wall of the 16 by 20s. I've been trying to move it away from the 16 by 20s. I try and stay affordable when I sell my stuff. I'm very much the mindset, like when we went to Glen Park and I saw somebody selling an acrylic painting like this big for like $300. I'm like, who's buying $300? No offense, but I couldn't do that to someone, right? So I sell it for like the 16 by 20s, $60, $80. If I really like it and I don't want it to sell, it usually ends up more money. I had a portrait I did of Prince, and the hair and the jacket were lyrics from songs. So like When Doves Cry, and Let's Go Crazy, and I loved that thing. And we were at Elmwood and it's hanging there. Everybody would come in and ask about it. How much is that? I'd be like $200. And they'd be like, oh, okay. Right. And everybody walk down and be like, yeah, Prince, right? Woman came in, how much is that? $200. I'll take it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I sold it $200. It's on the Game of Thrones ones with Jon Snow and Daenerys, same thing. And we were at a show and somebody was like, how much is that? I'm like, it's $150. Oh, I'll take it. Okay. My wife was super happy, but I was a little sad, but she's like, you got a picture of it, that's all.
So he and my daughter would have another price over. And they do sell at the price point that we have in the app. But it's my philosophy that every person should know what's our, that makes their story. It makes them happy, they should know it. And so for us.
Yeah, but she falls into sob stories all the time.
How not to go for this spring, because I really do like as people have and I always do
Discounts to teachers. Oh, this is gonna look like my classroom. Oh, that's half off then. No. Alright, I got paid like 5 more now. Yeah, we do stuff like that all the time. We had somebody come in. I painted a sea turtle and the woman started crying. And I was like, what's wrong? And she's like, oh, well, my daughter attached to a sea turtle, and that was like her thing, but she just passed away because this. I'm like, oh my God. So I just walked over, I bagged it up, and I'm like, there, you need to have this. She's like, well, no, I'll buy it. I'm like, no, you won't. It spoke to you. It's going home with you. Just take it. Like, I'm there to make money, but I'm there because it's like, I've been drawing for so many years, and to be able to be with all of you guys and put myself out there, and do it. It's the coolest thing. So I love it. Very fortunate.
Can you recommend any particular brand within coffee?
Yeah, no, it's funny. So I get asked that all the time. Stay away from Starbucks because they add sugar to it and the sugar makes it way too sticky. Stay away from flavor crystals. The crystals don't dissolve well enough. I don't know why. It takes too long. It doesn't work well with paint. I also think it's because it's a little bit of sugar in it as well. Cafe Bustelo is a Puerto Rican blend of coffee. You can get it at the dollar store. It's super dark, rich coffee when you drink it normally. So it makes really good tea.
All freeze dried.
Yeah, it's all freeze dried. You have a question?
the shows that
No. No, my anxiety is still there. It is. Yes, it is. It depends on what type of show it is and if I've been there before. Comic-Cons, easy. I have no problem with Comic-Cons. I sometimes barely put in any effort to them, to be honest, because I get all my stuff, I go, everybody knows me, it's easy. It's a community of people who are fellow comic book nerds and stuff like that, so that's easy. Doing your show, the last one I did, the East Aurora show, uber panic. Okay, the town itself is beautiful and lovely. We live in Lancaster, but we love coming to East Aurora. Love Taste. I would love to do a pop up in Taste, like that would be a dream for me. I just like that place. So if anybody knows anybody,
Yes.
I've tried. It seems like I keep getting stonewalled by the barista. They're like, well, yeah, so I need to find the manager. And it was funny because somebody was at a show of mine and they're like, I know the manager, I will tell them. I'm like, here's my card. Tell them, I would love to do a pop-up. So they get easier, but it depends on the crowd. Elmwood always frightens me because it's so busy. And it's a tough one too, because you don't leave your stuff there. So you set up on Allen West, you set up on Saturday morning, you tear down on Saturday night, you set back up again on Sunday morning. So that's crazy. There's always a little bit of a, like last year, people were running through people's booths and stealing things, taking it, running out. So that happens. Well, we've done it 2 or 3 times now. 3 times. Yes. So oddly enough, I Kismet follows me around. Or serendipity, whatever you want to call it. We went to T Public. Is it T Public? No, T Public's the website. There's something, it's a t-shirt store is on Elmwood. It used to be inside, it's inside the old toy store. So you know the big treehouse toy store that used to be on Elmwood. So she bought me this shirt, it's got a buffalo on it, it's really cool. It's like a hipster buffalo. And so we went back and we were gonna look at new shirts. And we were talking to the guy and brought up, like, it was the day of the Elmwood art, or the different art festival that we weren't doing. And he's like, and I brought up that I was an artist, and we started talking to him. I said I paid with coffee, and he's like, "Oh, well, we have a spot up front that the guy who's there, he's just squatting there. We told him he could stay there. But next year, you could be there if you want." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, if you remember me." Then his office manager walks in, and he's like, "This guy paints with coffee," and she goes, "Are you espresso your art?" I'm like, yes. And she's like, "I just messaged you 2 days ago about the other painting." And I'm like, That's weird, like literally, like I had just been talking to this woman and then there she was, and like, she's like, oh no, yeah, you're in for next year, so. Next year I will be out in front of the Big Tree Toy Store on Elmwood, kind of on the main strip, like Rogue. The cool thing is, because of all the years that they've, shunned me and I paid the entry fee anyway, now I get to do it for free. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But of course, I'm gonna panic the whole time, figure out like how much I have to bring and probably print too much and. Yeah,
Good question from Polly online. She
Yeah.
wanted to know, do you have to worry about it moving and do you seal it?
good question. Yes, I do seal it. We use an acrylic sealer on it, so we've never had a painting mold. Like I've said, we've had ones in our house for years, because they are acrylically sealed. They still retain the smell, but they don't mold or get funky. It's not like if you leave your coffee cup on your desk at work for a couple of days and you come back and you get that white fuzzy stuff growing. That doesn't happen with the painting. I don't know if it's the process in which I brew it that helps it out and not having that, but it also the acrylic sealing, because even in the jar that I make it in, it doesn't mold, it doesn't get funky, so it stays fresh. The hardest part about doing it in the jar is finding the type of jar that you can take the lid off and then it doesn't get stuck and sealed in. So I finally found one like this where it kind of pours up the top and it's really messy. But I did bring it if anybody wants to see, pour it in a cup, you can see how thick it is. It's definitely not coffee or gin. Everybody's always like, but you ever mistakenly drink it? No. I have accidentally drank the water I dip the brushes in, because I'll use a coffee cup like an idiot. And I put the brush in it, and I'm sometimes drinking coffee, so I put the brush over here, and then I grab the water, I'm like, oh, that's like paintbrush water. So I've done that, I will admit to that. Yeah.
So here's the question. How did you get started?
How did I get started? Because we were doing Comic Cons, we were asked to come do a show at Pulp 716, which is like a comic book store, coffee shop in Watt. And we were like, yeah, sure. And we were there and we were selling our prints and I spilled coffee on my sketch pad. And I just happened to have a paintbrush in with my pencil bag. And I'm like, well, maybe I could make it work and I'll make it be the person's hair. And I'm like, no, this is terrible. You can't paint with coffee. And I Googled, can you paint with coffee? And it like came up with all these like painting doing spoons. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I love coffee. Let's give this a go. And now I'm known as like, we go to shows all the time and it's like, oh, it's the coffee guy. It's the coffee guy. So, I don't mind that name since I've been called worse. So if the coffee guy is one of them, I'm okay with it. I met you at a show we were at, right? It was at yeah. Yeah,
I was just there Saturday.
yeah, we were there for a holiday show. And he came in and recruited me. He's like, you have to come join the guild. I'm like, no, I used to wear a guild material. I paint Batman and Game of Thrones. And a pandemic happened, and then afterwards, here you go. Anything else? Yeah.
Have you ever thought about switching weekend?
Oh. My answer anytime anybody says that is death before deep. Never deep.
Did I hear you say to get that?
Yeah, this coming holiday show, I will be here. I had some rides. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. You'll get to see the 7 deadly sins. They will be done by.
Bring some Dr. Who stuff.
Okay. I do have Doctor Who stuff. It's funny because like that's what happens to me though, is like, do you have any video game art? Nope, I guess I have to go learn how to do 30 different video games.
Which Doctor Who?
I've done, what did we do? 9 of them? I got commissioned to do some, yeah, I did a David
And
Tennant.
he's gonna be the next one, did you know that?
Yeah, so it was special. So a woman that I work with, she's a huge Doctor Who fan, and I would paint on these 10 by 20 canvases, so very narrow. And I liked them because they looked like comic book panels, and I thought it's kind of cool. So those, that was like one of the older doctors, I think it's the 10 factor. I did almost like a triptych, where it was lined up, where you could put them separately, but if you brought them together, they kind of looked like they were shoulder to shoulder. Any other? Did I do okay?
You did great, John Kidelan. Thank you very much.